Well, here we are live on a Sunday morning. Coffee with Cioffi and Rao, or if you prefer, coffee with Rao and Cioffi. Morning, everybody. It's the Joe and Joe Weather Show either way. And Joe, when you think back about, let's go back 8 or 9 days ago.
Yeah,
Okay, let's go back 8 or 9 days ago, and look at the fact that we had um, snow, sleet, hail, tornadoes, severe thunderstorms, uh, not to forget a couple of nice days in the mix, a widespread frost and freeze, temperatures in the 30s, temperatures in the 80s, and we sort of half seriously said last week that by probably this weekend we would have a tropical storm on the map.
and we do.
And we do. So I'm thinking, I've decided that um, the next thing that should happen, I know we were sort of kind of trying to figure out whether it should be, one of the biblical 10 plagues, the locusts. I've decided that we should just have like a whole an asteroid just come crashing into the ocean someplace. I think that would just probably be just put the icing on the cake of the year so far.
Well, I mean, that certainly is a possibility. That, in fact,
What, an asteroid?
well, astronomers say that sometime in the next 100,000 years, the Earth will get hit by a sizable piece of debris from space, whether it falls in the ocean or whether or not it makes landfall on one of the continents is yet to be seen. But it's not a matter of if it will, but when it will. So it could happen anytime. On the other hand, um, one thing that is certainly possible at most any time, and I mentioned this about a week or so ago, based upon what a seismologist at the Lamont Doherty Research Center told me many years ago, New York and the Northeast is overdue for a major earthquake. And I heard yesterday that they had a major earthquake, 6.5 Richter, northwest of Las Vegas. Now, if we had something like that in the immediate tri-state area, forget it. It would be like it would be an unbelievable disaster.
Yeah, but not we
The
don't need.
infrastructure is not built for that type of a shake. Um, as we all know, the definition of an earthquake is Mother Nature doing the twist. But anyway,
Right.
uh, that's that's neither here nor there. But your thoughts about an asteroid striking the ocean, then you're thinking about something along the lines of the movie Deep Impact, where 1,000 foot tidal wave came crashing on shore at New York
Yeah,
City.
something like that. Seriously. I mean, obviously, it's not something I'm sitting here rooting for. I'm just observing that it's just been a very odd stretch of days inside what has been a very, you know, uh, extraordinary couple of months given our circumstances with everything else that's going on. But let's take a look at Tropical Storm Arthur, which formed last night. And there was a this time of year to get a purely tropical system is a little unusual. But a lot of times when we've had these early season storms, they wind up being more subtropical than anything else. But this one from the get go really, Joe, has a very tropical look to it. As a solid core, warm core. There's usually with subtropical storms they oftentimes have a what I would call like a hybrid or warmish type core, but you oftentimes can't tell the difference between that and say a typical cold core system. But this one certainly has the look of a tropical, a purely tropical system.
Yes, already. And it's been only about what? So we were together back on Friday night, and it was nothing more than a disorganized mass of clouds and showers down off of the South Florida coast. Now, take a look at that now. 36 hours later, it's become a full-fledged tropical cyclone.
That it has. And on the latest Hurricane Center advisory, which is from 11 a.m. So we started our show pretty much in time with the new advisory, which is good. as opposed to them updating it in the middle of it. 30.5 north and 77.4 west. Top winds are 45 miles an hour, so they've nudged the winds up just a little bit. And we have tropical storm warnings up for the Outer Banks of North Carolina with impact sometime tonight into Monday. This is probably going to produce some big rains even back to the west into the mountains, given what's going on in the atmosphere with the flow, and we'll get into that in just a bit. The Hurricane Center's forecast. Now, for those of you who follow models, will immediately note that while the Hurricane Center's forecast is to pretty much hook it to the right, and this is something that you and I were talking about late last week, we do have a few models that have a slightly different solution in that it keeps the circulation more tucked into the coast, given the developments of what's going on in the atmosphere to the west of this, which is a deep upper trough. The bottom line, though, is that regardless of if that happens, if that were to happen, I don't really think it has much of a significant impact in terms of the practical weather that would be experienced. It's gradually going to lose whatever tropical characteristics it has once it gets north of 35 degrees north anyway. So I don't think even if that winds up happening that it's something that we have to be overly concerned about, other than the fact that there will be some coastal flooding to deal with. Are you on the same page with me with this?
Yes, yes, and absolutely, because the waters, especially north of 35, are simply not warm enough yet to support a tropical. Now, the only way this thing could have a really significant say in the weather up here is if it suddenly were the upper low associated with it were to open up, and this thing was suddenly going to chug rapidly northward at, let's say, 40 or 50 miles an hour while maintaining tropical tropical storm strength. Then it wouldn't have time to really diminish to any great degree, but on sheer momentum, it would have enough to have significant influence. But again, this thing is going to just, as from what I saw last night, Joe, this thing is going to just meander, if you will, off the coast, if not as a tropical storm, at least as some sort of a cyclone for a good number of days to come, and probably will have an impact in one way, shape, or form on our own weather as we especially progress into the middle and latter part of the week.
I'm still trying, and that part of the forecast I'm still trying to figure out, because we've gone from a wipeout of rain on some runs late last week where it looked like it was going to be raining on and off from Monday right through Friday. Now it doesn't look like it's going to do very much of anything at all until we get into the middle part of the week, maybe. I'm still trying to work that part of the equation out.
Right. And initially, it appeared that actually, it still looks like the upper low that is dropping down into the mid-Atlantic or southeast. That system eventually is going to have some kind of a say in our weather. But again, the timing issues are such that, as you mentioned, Joe, at first, I mean, Friday, it looked for all the world like we were going to be looking at a rainy late Monday into Tuesday, and now it doesn't look like much of anything is going to be happening until maybe later in the week when the corpse of the upper low, if you will, maneuvers out and over our area. And
but that upper low, Joe, even at 84 hours on the NAM, is still back down, and that's Wednesday night. That upper low is still back in eastern Tennessee. The problem here is that if you watch this, the upper low drops down so far west, it moves almost straight south from northern Illinois down into western Tennessee. I mean, you don't often see upper lows digging that far west and south. If you're going to see it, usually it does happen in the spring. But if you've got that anchor dropping down, and if you look off the Carolina coast, you can see the reflection. This is for this early tomorrow morning, 5 a.m. That little circle, I'll mark it off here. So right here, this is Arthur, the upper air reflection of it. Here's your upper low that's driving down in western Illinois, and there's a shortwave trough from southern Mississippi down into the Gulf of Mexico. It either the dilemma has been, as it continues to be, does that Arthur get kicked out to the east or the east northeast, or does the upper low absorb it? And you've got the NAM model, at least today, trying to absorb it. The upper low coming down, and the system that represents Arthur tries to maintain a separate identity until at the end it just basically gets absorbed by the upper low that's out to the west. This is a pretty odd setup, Joe. You got this big upper high sitting over Lake Superior. You don't often see this. Big upper high there in southern Canada to the northern Great Lakes, and lower heights and lower pressures down in the Gulf states. Usually it's in reverse.
Yeah, look at that. I mean, that's what, a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cutoff low. That's not bad for the latter part of May.
Yeah, underneath a big cutoff high
Yeah, yeah,
to the north.
right.
There's no push here to get this out of the way in any. There's nothing in the flow that's coming along to kick that low out. So it has to wait for this upper high to break down. Or maybe there is something out in the west that might be able to give it a little bit of a football kick. We'll take a look. We'll see on the GFS. We'll see what that shows.
And I used that analogy a few days ago that it looks like the upper ridge, the upper high, is almost like cradling the closed low, thus precluding the closed low from moving very much. It's like the high says, "No, come on, let's stay a little while longer."
Right.
And with that type of setup, you can't expect much movement of that upper low for a while.
The GFS model last night, it kept the tropical system more tucked in. You see its reflection here on the GFS by early Tuesday is sitting somewhere southeast of the Jersey coast, well south of Long Island, and now you've got your upper low coming down. But at this point here, this is probably already losing all its tropical characteristics. And then the upper low waits for there's your setup by Thursday evening, much like the NAM had with that upper high over at Lake Superior and the upper low trapped underneath it. Now eventually that upper high does break down, and by the time we get to Friday, the upper low begins to lift up northeast and weaken. It's still over us early Saturday morning, but then it does look like it gets out of the way, and then we hopefully should see some improvement for the second part of the Memorial Day holiday weekend.
It does. It does look like, and again, it's easy enough to see a tropical system off of the southeast coastline and see the projected path and just arbitrarily say, oh, well, this is going to have a possible influence on our weather. But that's not the case. And I saw heard not a few forecasters allude to that last night. But that's not really the case. The case is the main player in our weather as we progress through this week is not going to be really that tropical that tropical low. It is going to be the upper low, and eventually how it tracks and its strength and how it moves relative to us will be the deciding factors to just how much unsettled weather we're going to see over the next 4 or 5 days.
The recon was out there a little while ago. It just finished its run. The last observation was at 10:15 Eastern time. So this is what we're looking at in terms of the profile. So if you're in the outer banks of North Carolina, the western side of this isn't really producing very much in terms of wind. We have a few wind barbs that are showing some gusts up to gale force on the west side. But the strongest winds, such as they are running and this is at flight level, so they brought up to 45 miles an hour, 45 to 50 knot winds, well to the southeast and well to the northeast of the circulation center. The lowest pressure they found was 1,002 millibars. So this is a weak tropical storm. If you didn't know it was there, it's going to probably have an impact similar to a developing coastal low. So at least from the standpoint of giving it perspective, this is not a major hurricane. It's not even a minor hurricane. It's not even close. It is manageable. I think the biggest issue may wind up actually being rainfall more than anything else. But the recon, I'm actually kind of impressed considering that it's already north of 30 degrees north. That you've got a tropical system that's that here in the middle of May, but the ocean water temperatures are actually running about a degree or so above normal. There's a big warm pool of water down off the southeast coast, and it's also not too far away from the Gulf Stream. It's actually moved away from it now, but it was close to the Gulf Stream when it was off the Florida coast yesterday in its development phase. But you know, for May 17th, and this is 6 years in a row now that we've had an early season named tropical system.
Right, right, and maybe there have been some who have been pushing for changing the rules a little bit and saying that instead of June 1st, that the tropical storm season should actually begin earlier, maybe in mid-May, or maybe at the beginning of May instead of the beginning of June, based upon what has happened over the last 5 or 6 years.
It's also, I think, it might be we've been beating the Pacific to the first name storm. I think for most of these last 6 years,
Right.
I would say certainly in at least four of them, where we've gotten the running start ahead of the Pacific side.
Well, but for the Western Pacific, is Von Fong still alive and kicking? Or
I don't know. I didn't check.
yeah, well,
It was as of last night, but we don't count the Western Pacific. That goes all year round sometimes, so
right, right.
not going to count that too much. Let's swing back to the coast. I just want to show everybody what's going on here as far as current weather is concerned, and we don't have any precipitation. There's no rain that's anywhere close to the Carolinas right now. We do have some winds running at about 20 to 25, occasionally up to 30 knots. Along the coast, there was a 29 mile an hour. I mean, this is a mile an hour, not gusts. This is Wilmington was east northeast at 23, gusting to 29. So it's a little bit breezy along the immediate coast. Winds are from the north northeast. Temperatures are running in the upper 70s and lower 80s. So there's nothing really going on at the moment that is causing any issues here. But we do have northeast to east winds, so it's beginning to set up the system running south down off the Outer Banks, well south of the Outer Banks at the moment, and east of the probably the Georgia coast, straight east as far as where it is it's located now. And when we run it up on the NAM model, Joe, today on the latest run, we don't have the new GFS yet, but you can see what happens. You've got the system out in to the west with the upper low, that 1003 low in Illinois. The NAM actually looks like it brings it ashore over the Outer Banks into eastern North Carolina, and then it starts to nudge it northeast and just sort of sits it there off the New Jersey coast. And then it just disappears.
Right.
You see the dilemma, folks. And I'm talking. You got this area of rain that moves into eastern North Carolina and then nudges up into Chesapeake Bay, kind of skims parts of South Jersey, reaches briefly Long Island early Wednesday morning. But there isn't a whole lot happening here, and I just wonder whether this week may be more about onshore flow and clouds. But as far as rain is concerned, I don't know. I'm wondering how much we're going to wind up getting out of this rain-wise this week.
Yeah, that crossed my mind looking at last night's run. I said, hey, this all of a sudden would look to be a pretty good soaking rain almost here on Tuesday. Now things have really dried up quite a bit. So you always hate when you have a scenario like this where you're watching a tropical system on the one hand, you're watching an unusually strong upper low on the other hand coming down from the north and west, and how are they going to interact, or if they're going to interact, and blah blah blah, yada yada yada. And
I know.
all of this happening in the days leading up to the unofficial start of the summer season, the Memorial Day weekend, which I can't believe is coming up next weekend.
The watches and warnings that we have up this morning around the country. The big block, all those reds you see off the coast, those are marine warnings for tropical storm warnings that are up. And of course, we have tropical storm warnings up for the Outer Banks of North Carolina. We have flash flood watches up from Missouri northeastward to the Great Lakes, and that includes St. Louis and Chicago, as they're getting some heavy rains there. And that red area you see in southern Missouri, those are flash flood warnings that are ongoing. Out in California, Joe, we've got winter storm warnings up for the Sierra Nevadas. I always love seeing that in the, when you start still seeing that sort of stuff in May and June, that's pretty cool. But there's a deep upper low that's swinging into the west, and no shocker there. And we have actually a lot of wind issues across parts of northern California into Oregon, and also across much of Nevada. Oh, I'm sorry, Nevada. And some red flag warnings in southern Nevada, east across Arizona, northern Arizona to southern Utah, and into parts of southwestern Colorado. So it's unusually dry in those areas, but I always find it's always fun for me to see these winter storm warnings out in the west.
Right.
Okay, the U.S. satellite view here, folks. A lot of action on both coasts and also in the middle. So there's not a whole lot of geography here that's enjoying decent weather. Up in the Dakotas, down in the southern Rockies, the Southwest at the moment, other than just some low clouds around, it's there's no precip going on at the moment. But we do have some showers and thunderstorms and some potential severe weather today across parts of Texas and into the Gulf states. You see Arthur spinning off the southeast coast. Now, you're in sunshine where you are right now, are you?
Right.
Okay.
We have a fairly good amount of sunshine. Yeah.
Yeah. You and I are both sitting in a bright sunny hole at the moment that extends into northern New Jersey, northeastern Pennsylvania to about you, and into western Connecticut. There's clouds up to your north. There's a lot of clouds to the south of there, from South Jersey down into Virginia. Then, of course, you see where Arthur is, that's offshore. But right now, the coastal Carolinas, actually just seeing some cloud cover that is beginning to sweep in from the southeast, and some developing cloud cover inland from the daytime heating. And, of course, that tropical storm just kind of inching along. And then we've got our severe weather band. Looking at the radar, at the moment in Texas, there's just some showers and a few thunderstorms. Actually, this is kind of weak, and this is weak on in the Texas side. I misspoke there. Sorry about that. So we've got some few heavier showers in the mix, but nothing substantial. There's some heavy stuff up as far as rain is concerned when you get into Missouri and into Illinois, particularly around the Great Lakes. They're getting, there's quite a bit of rain that's going on up there, Joe. That's the upper low. This is the upper low in action here, folks. With all the rain up through the lakes, and in California, looks like we got the snow on the radar up in the Sierra Nevadas going on even as we speak.
Jingle bells, jingle bells. Have they ever had snow? I'm sure they must have in the distant past or recent past, in July and August in the Sierra Nevada. I mean, those mountains are high enough that they could very well have.
I wouldn't be shocked. This is some, up in some elevated area that was the case. I don't know. Storm Prediction Center. Let's see what they're up to. And we've got a marginal risk of severe weather today. Actually, yeah, I'm sorry, a slight risk of severe marginal risk in an area from Mississippi on northward into Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. A slight risk covers eastern Illinois and western Indiana. That is for today. For tomorrow, the severe weather risk shifts to Ohio, eastern Kentucky, Tennessee, northern Georgia, western South Carolina. Marginal risk, and also a marginal risk up in northern Montana. And then on, what day is this? Tuesday into Wednesday, we have a small area of marginal risk along the Florida East Coast, and a small area of marginal risk up in Montana and northwestern North Dakota. And that's it.
Right. And that, you see relatively close where the thunderstorm activity is on day 2. And then on day 3, it just kind of gets squashed off to our south, whereas it was, just a stone's throw away really to the west of us Western Pennsylvania on day two, and all of a sudden, you
Yeah.
know, the sound effect for day
You
three.
met another and you was
It was gone.
gone.
Yes, yes,
All right, I got the old GFS up from last night since we're not going to have the new one out in it doesn't start till 11:30 and it's 11:25. So going forward, Mr. Rao, we got to get rid of this upper low, which we eventually do, but it may take all week. Hopefully that leads to improvement over the weekend and into the Memorial Day holiday weekend. And after that, one positive, I'm looking at the longer range flow. At least I'm not seeing any kind of serious blocking. I'm not really seeing any kind of, Canadian jet stream, cold air flow, because, at the end of the forecast period, now we're already into June.
that's right. In fact,
I'm at Saturday, May 30th on the 318 hour. So
the
the colder air in Canada is just going to be trapped up with a separate jet way to the north. So we're just going to be dealing with weather systems that are going to attempt to be moving across from west to east. So that at least is a more normalized flow, and we won't be uh, having to worry about getting too involved with cold highs and northeast winds. This is in the longer part of the forecast period.
may I also echo a comment on the chat board from Chuck Cardillo, who said that the models have been so horrible for the weather the past 2 or 3 days. I think they should be tested for the coronavirus.
Well, he mentions the coronavirus. I was not aware of this, but it was pointed out to me that they are doing apparently because of the virus. They are doing less in the way of data that they're getting into some of these models.
Right, I saw that too.
With fewer planes flying, they're getting far less data than they usually are, and they seem to be affecting a lot of the models in the short range. You know what? I haven't. I don't know that I've really noticed anything out of the ordinary because it's the spring, and usually models have a very difficult time in the spring to begin with. So I'm just kind of working on the assumption that they're usually god awful, and so they just continue to be god awful. But yeah, there is some truth to the fact that because of the situation with the coronavirus, that there again, my understanding is that there's less data getting into this stuff.
Right. So that may be so maybe Chuck is not too far off in his commentary about the coronavirus having some impact on the forecasts.
Well, could very well be. Now, here's our dilemma here, Joe, is the fact that, we've got this low up in northern Indiana tonight into tomorrow morning. There's an arm of rain that moves across central New England. But as far as, say, southern New England down to Virginia, it looks pretty quiet, although I think it's going to be pretty cloudy for tomorrow. You've got Arthur near the North Carolina coast trying to move northeastward. I think gradually it just loses tropical characteristics, I'm guessing, as it moves. See, even the GFS last night just takes it off the New Jersey coast and then starts to push it east and then it disappears. But as far as rain is concerned, we're not seeing a whole lot being generated here. And as you point out, late in the week, when the upper low to the south finally gets ejected northward, maybe at that point, when we get into Thursday and Friday, we'll probably have to deal with some showery rains. And actually, the model, because of the slowness of pulling it out, still has some leftover precip in the northeast on Saturday before it looks like it gets a bit better for Sunday and Monday.
And with all this talk about whether or not we should continue social distancing or whether or not states should open up and allow lots of people to go to parks and beaches, for those who are opposed to that latter scenario, they may actually be rooting for an unsettled Saturday and maybe even Sunday and Monday of next week to keep people indoors as opposed to having them roam outdoors. So it's six of one and half a dozen of the other in terms of what you want or what you don't want, and what the weather may or may not provide for us as we move into again the unofficial start of the summer season.
By the way, I just brought up the HWRF model so we could take a look at this is one of the hurricane models that they run. So we could take a look at Arthur on this particular model. This has been one of the models that has been left of the other globals, and it actually has now. the deepening pressure down to a 991 or a 989, I got to believe that some of that is being baroclinically induced. And I don't know whether it actually gets that low, but the HWRF takes it up to just off the New Jersey coast, and then it just weakens pretty rapidly by the time we get to Tuesday into Wednesday. Just sort of follows the GFS along, and then it's gone after that because you get that low to the south that forms. Oddly enough, Joe, it does produce a little belt of strong winds along the New Jersey coast and down the south shore of Long Island late Monday night into Tuesday morning from the northeast.
Right.
Some gales there. They're not long lasting. But the one concern with coastal flooding is the very long fetch of easterly winds that runs across the Atlantic from out east of 60 degrees west and goes all the way into the coastline for Tuesday and Wednesday. So I think there might be some coastal flooding issues that are going to be showing up at high tides starting maybe as early as Tuesday morning and for later Tuesday into Wednesday.
Right. Well, that was not, I mean, regardless of how uncertain we were in terms of the path of Arthur and the interaction with the upper low, one thing I think that we could have said clearly with some certainty or surety was the fact that by Monday and Tuesday, the onshore winds were going to increase, that the gradient was going to tighten up a bit, because even a minor disturbance running into that big high pressure dome up to the north of us was going to cause the gradient to tighten and to bring in those gusty onshore winds, which could eventually lead to some kind of coastal flooding and maybe even a bit of beach erosion as well. By the way, this is a learning experience for me. I didn't even realize that Tropical Tidbits offered you a look at the HWRF model. Now, did they do that with all the hurricane models?
Yeah, just if you go to well, I just brought up the new spaghetti plots. Let me show this first, and then I'll go back and I'll show you where you go. So the vast majority of the cluster, and this is what the Hurricane Center is following. The vast majority of the hurricane models that they look at swing it out to the east and then just take it out to east and even east southeast into the open waters of the Atlantic. There are a couple of renegade models like the AVNI and the HWFI. I'm not sure what the differences are between all these different models. Some are more sensitive to certain elements than others, and obviously, if you look at the GFS and the NAM, they look more like the two renegade models. The European and the UK Met models look like the vast majority of them taking them out to the east. So that's the way I'm going to lean on this, regardless of what we're seeing with these the low hanging further to the west. And as you said, Joe, it really doesn't matter very much in terms of the outcome. Now, if you go on Tropical Tidbits, just go as far as the HWRF. If you're on forecast models and you just click on hurricane. So you've got the HWRF, the HWRFP. If you click on that, it'll give you the runs that they have it for, like Arthur, Vong Fong, and the new one, Amphan, AMPHAN. And then there's also the HMON, the HMON, which they run for Arthur. This is more of an intensity model.
Now, do they have the Emerald Lagasse model?
Not at the moment. They're working on it, even as we speak.
You know what the Emerald Lagasse model is, right?
I almost hate to ask you, but I'll bite. Go ahead.
BAM!
Oh, you're a bad boy.
The BAM model.
Well, we have a BAM model.
Yeah. So we do have an Emerald Lagasse model.
I guess we do. So there you go. All right. So let's do Briller Jeopardy.
I actually have Briller Jeopardy for you, and I also have a Keith Hernandez Jeopardy for you.
Okay, so you go first.
All right. Well, we'll give you, since Scott Briller was questioning the fact that over the last couple of weeks I have not given you his Briller Jeopardy questions, and I apologize deeply to Mr. Briller for that. So I will give you the first Briller Jeopardy question. Where was the chairman born?
Where
was he born?
Rochester.
He says hint. It is a city in New York that got a little snow this winter. That got little snow this winter.
Little snow.
Right.
Well, then it wasn't Rochester or Syracuse. So I guess it was probably New York City.
Yes. All right. You got five chances. What borough?
I'm gonna say Queens,
No, but that's the one right next to it, Brooklyn.
Brooklyn. But it was one or the other.
Number two, Briller. Question number two. What part-time job did Mr. Briller just get that is very helpful?
Oh, he's delivering goods for COVID patients, I believe.
Absolutely true.
Yes, he is.
He has a hospital route on Tuesday and Thursday night that delivers masks, gloves, and uniforms to hospitals.
Oh, that's awesome. That's just
Right.
there's a lot of people in need for all of that stuff, and that's a good thing. That
And
is a very
finally,
good thing.
and finally, the Keith Hernandez question.
Okay.
And last night, SNY ran probably one of the greatest baseball games ever played, the 16 inning game where the Mets won the pennant in 1986 in the Astrodome against Houston. Both teams going back and forth, back and forth. You never know when this game was finally going to end. Bob Murphy, the late Bob Murphy of the New York Met broadcasting staff, said of over 5,000 games he ever saw, that was the greatest game that he ever witnessed. But in any case, one of the players in that game was Keith Hernandez. Tim McCarver in the game made a reference to, well, whenever Keith Hernandez writes his biography or autobiography, and he was suggesting title names, I happen to have the Keith Hernandez book, and I was thumbing through it last night. And on page 93, this is something I didn't know, and I checked into it, and it is absolutely true. I asked my wife this question this morning, and Joe, it was like she didn't want to know the answer for 10 minutes. She was trying to think of what possibly the answer could be. Of the 48 contiguous United States, not including Alaska and Hawaii, and it wouldn't make any difference, especially with Hawaii, this question, what is the state that is bordered by eight other states on all sides? There's one state that is bordered by eight other states on all sides of this particular state. Eight.
So what you're trying to say is that this one state has 8 states bordering it.
Correct.
All right. If I'm going to I'm going to take a guess, and I'm going to say Ohio.
Wrong, but I'll tell you what. The fact that I mentioned it's a question I got from Keith Hernandez's autobiography.
Am I geographically close?
No, not well. You're lukewarm. Let's put it
Okay.
that way. But the fact that I'm talking about Keith Hernandez, if you know anything about his baseball career,
Mm-hmm.
you then may be able to figure this out as to what state he was alluding to. If I tell you what I'll say, I'll get another hint. It has to do with one of the teams that Keith Hernandez played for during his storied career.
Well, who did he play for besides the Mets? I'm not a Met fan, so I don't follow baseball as closely anymore as I did when I was a
He
kid.
played for the Cleveland Indians,
Okay.
and he also played for, and this will give it to you right then and there, the Cardinals,
Missouri.
Missouri.
Missouri borders 8 states.
Missouri borders 8 states, and the 8 states are
Well, I could look, Kansas,
right.
Kansas, Iowa, probably part of Kansas, Iowa. To the south is Arkansas. On the
Mhm.
other side, you've got Tennessee, Kentucky, Illinois. Did I leave? What did I leave out? Nebraska, maybe.
My God, you got all but
Who would I leave out?
one state, Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. Yeah, like a little
Oklahoma.
corner of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Tennessee, Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas. And the reason why he mentioned that question is that when he played for the St. Louis Cardinals, he said that Cardinal games were broadcast by the radio station. You could hear it some nights here in the New York area, KMOX out of
Yes.
St. Louis. And he said, believe me when I tell you that because of the tremendous power and coverage of that particular radio station, that it reached out to all of the neighboring states. And he then mentioned that in Missouri, there were 8 other states that bordered Missouri. And he said we had Cardinal fans, rabid Cardinal fans in every one of those states. And then he ran down the list, and I said, "Wow, that's amazing. Eight states bordering one. It's incredible. New York, I think, has six.
Yeah, I was just kind of visually looking at Ohio in my mind, and I was thinking, okay, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Kentucky, Indiana, Michigan, uh, and I don't know. I just kind of
West Virginia.
Yeah, well, I think I said West Virginia. Okay, so here are your two. So let's get these going. The last by the way, you might have noticed that I got my hair done.
Now, how did you get your hair done?
I took
Did you do it yourself or?
self buzzer.
Oh,
I
okay.
actually did a pretty decent job. The only thing I did was I actually clipped a very small portion of my goatee, which it's hard to notice because it's the part that's white. So it you have to sort of look at it. I don't know if you can see it on the camera shot. Might not show it pretty well, but other than that, I thought I did a pretty decent job, and I do feel a lot better now. So the last president with facial hair.
The last president with facial hair. Was it William Howard Taft?
Very good. Yes, it was
That
William Howard Taft. Yes, who did William Howard Taft beat out for the presidency?
Oh, fantastic. And what was the question?
I said, who did William Howard Taft? I should rephrase this. Who did William Howard Taft beat out for the nomination in 1909?
Was it Teddy Roosevelt?
Yeah, it was Teddy Roosevelt. My hero, Teddy Roosevelt.
Teddy Roosevelt, I think, eventually went for the third party, the
Bull Moose. Yes. Yeah. Well, it's very interesting, because the more things change, the more they say the same. Like they were going all that stuff back about Bernie Sanders being cheated out of the nomination back in 2016 on the Democratic Party with these super delegates who carried more votes, and they basically screwed the guy out of a nomination. Well, the same kind of thing happened to Teddy Roosevelt in 1909 with William Howard Taft, and he was screwed out of the nomination. So he went the third party route. He had won more primaries. He had the primary votes, but the party bosses couldn't stand him because he was a progressive. So they got rid of him. And if you look at Teddy Roosevelt has a long career of landing in jobs that the sole purpose of sending him to those jobs was to get rid of him. He was in New York. I think he was chief of police in New York, and he was changing, all the hiring up to more people, and the party bosses didn't like him, so they got him elected to governor. So he became the governor of the state of New York, and then they didn't like him. They didn't like him as governor, so they got rid of him by getting him put on as vice president. To oh my God, who got and he wound up getting assassinated in 1900.
Was it Garfield?
No.
James Abram Garfield? Or?
No, it wasn't Garfield. Who was the president in 1900?
Oh.
Well, anyway, he wound up being vice president, and then the president died in office, so then he becomes president.
Right.
So now he's president of the United States. And they still try to get rid of him. They spent his entire career. He virtually wound up as president of the United States by being shoved out of other jobs, which is just pretty fascinating.
How about for the president around 1900, William McKinley?
McKinley, okay. McKinley. By the way, have you ever been to Teddy Roosevelt's house in Oyster Bay?
Right, I have been. In fact, I can do better than that. My son and I, when he was like 12 years old, and he was a member of the Boy Scouts. They actually had a weekend camp out there. And
I love that place. That's such a cool place.
They have a guy there who looks just like and sounds just like Teddy Roosevelt.
Yes. Yeah. No, I know you were talking about because I met up with that guy.
And in fact, when he gave his speech and he finished his speech, we're all sitting there listening to him, raptly listening to him. So when he finished his speech, before anybody had a chance to start applauding, I yelled out from the crowd, bully, bully. And now he's on Mount Rushmore.
If you're on Long, if you ever come to Long Island or you're on Long Island, go to Teddy Roosevelt's house
Sagamore
in
Hill.
Sagamore Hill in Oyster Bay. It is such a cool place. And I'm not, I'm kind of a history buff, but it's not something that I obsess over. But I just fell in love with that house and the way they led their lives with all the kids they had and the pets that they had running around the house. Just must have been a really fun place.
Right. And here's an example of how you can a name which was so popular and so well known, not just nationwide but worldwide, suddenly just drops out and nobody would know it. Nobody would know it today. When I went to visit Hyde Park, where Franklin Roosevelt.
Well, that's next on my list.
Franklin, that's a great place to go to as well. But they have this big statue of Franklin Roosevelt, and standing right at his side was his little dog. What was the name of the little dog, Joe?
Oh, I don't know.
Everybody knew that back in the 40s, even the 1950s, and maybe even the 60s, but nobody knows it today. I think it was a little Boston Terrier, Scotch Terrier, Fala, F-A-L-A.
F-A-L-A.
And he being known as the world's most famous pet, the world's most famous dog. And like I said, everybody, I'll tell you how well known it was, even in the 1960s, when Tim Conway was on McHale's Navy, was doing an imitation, a very good imitation of Franklin Roosevelt. He made reference to Fala. And again, everybody in that era knew, but now in the last 50 years or so, nobody knows who or what Fala is. But that was FDR's dog, Fala.
Right. They were the Sagamore Roosevelts, the Oyster Bay, Long Island Roosevelts were Republicans, and the Hyde Park Roosevelts up in upstate New York were Democrats. They were Eleanor Roosevelt was Teddy Roosevelt's niece. So there's and I think Eleanor and Franklin were fourth or fifth cousins, the way it all worked out. Just very. That's kind of how they did things in those days. So let's just leave it that way. Scott Briller hitting super chat. Thank you so much, Mr. Scott. And be sure to have a good day. By the way, the second part of this is an easy one. The TV show that you heard the first toilet flush.
Oh, that was All in the Family.
That's correct. Though the toilet does make its appearance in Leave It to Beaver.
Really?
Yes, but the censors permitted the toilet to be in Leave It to Beaver because it was central to the particular plot of that episode.
I did not know.
I don't know what episode. I'm guessing from how that's worded. It means that
I would assume that the
Beaver must have flushed something valuable down the toilet by accident.
Oh, well.
So they allowed the toilet actually to be in the shot.
And if you think about it, and I know you're a big movie buff, if they ever took you into the bathroom in a movie, you would see Carol Lombard floating in the tub in a milk bath, but you would never see the other appliances in that.
No, you never did, because people didn't go to the bathroom in those days, didn't you hear?
and the flushing of the toilet on All in the Family reminded some of the old timers of, well, that's kind of like in the radio shows, the old time radio shows, when Fibber McGee and Molly would open their closet. Everybody was waiting for them to open the closet, which was jam packed with stuff, and Fibber would get buried stuff that fell on him. And in that way, I think of the first year of All in the Family, everybody was waiting for Archie to go running upstairs to flush the toilet bowl. The first time that happened, that was like a sensation from one coast to the other.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God! Did you hear last night they flushed the toilet? On television, and they couldn't even let.
Uh-oh. You froze on me. Hello.
In one of his jokes,
he's back.
That out.
Joe, I'm kind of losing you for some reason.
Oh,
there, you're back. Okay, no, you kind of faded out there for a couple of seconds, but now you're back. So you could repeat what you were talking about with respect to the sensation of the toilet.
I was just saying that, here Archie flushed the toilet, and 10 years earlier, on the Tonight Show with Jack Parr. Jack Parr was censured by NBC and left the show out of protest for 6 weeks because the story or the joke that he told involved the WC, the water closet,
Oh,
which in another terminology, WC meant Westminster Cathedral. It just
ah,
said WC, and like well, they said, it's bad taste. We can't use that, and he was upset with that because they censored him. They cut it out of his show, and the next night he announced at the beginning of the show, I'm upset, I'm mad, and I'm leaving. Goodbye. And poor Jack Parr's version of Ed McMahon was Hugh Downs. So here's Jack Parr leaves, and all of a sudden Hugh Downs is left sitting there holding the bag, and he had to continue the show on his own. So
that's frightening. Or it could make your career one way or the other.
right.
All right, so what your plan? I already did my 6.5 mile walk this morning. So, and then I finished it off with my fruit smoothie that I made in the blender.
Well, we're having the kids over. My daughter's already here. Soon we'll have my son, my future daughter-in-law, and we're just going to have kind of a pre-Memorial Day type setting. I spent the morning shucking corn,
Oh,
uh,
okay, great.
so we're all shucked up, and we're all set to go for this afternoon.
All right. Well, you enjoy your day. Have a great day. Everybody have a great day. Let me just tell everybody, my website is down again. So the host company is working on bringing it back up. It actually came up for like 3 seconds this morning and then went back down. So something's going on. So hopefully it will be back up. So that means the app is down as well. So as soon as it comes up, it'll get updated. Patreon members, you're fine. You're getting your updates. I got a hurricane post coming up shortly. As soon as I'm done with the live stream, I'll be posting that over there, and we'll hopefully get everything working a bit later today. So everybody have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the nice weather if you have it where you are, and we'll see.